All right, the third and final part of the Venn diagram is team leader. So depending on what teams are called and what sort of learning areas are called, or even that's sort of a buzzword in and of itself, but this will look different obviously depending on where you are. But essentially, you're leading a team of teachers, and people often think that this is that you're meant to be changing the world, but that's probably more sort of your student leadership role. Those kind of things. Probably pedagogical leadership is more transformational, trying to change people, trying to improve things, and trying to make those sort of relationships work, I guess, and get people improving upon themselves and professionally learning. As a team leader, that's sort of like a very small part of your role, depending on the school or the setting that you're at. But as a general rule, as team leader, in the literature we call it managerial leadership. So you are a manager in the same way that McDonald's has managers. I think in Queensland even they call it like a line manager, which has a very sort of factory model kind of way of framing it. But that's essentially your work. So you are running meetings, you are setting agendas, setting minutes, forming sort of sub teams, assigning your leaders of each of the roles sort of along the way. So it might be, well, someone needs to be leading that, so I'll sort of select the people that I think are best suited for that. But managerialism, it sounds sort of uninspiring, but that's essentially the work that you're going to be carrying out. So it's a lot of paper documents and meetings, and being the bridge between different meetings. I was just at this meeting and they were talking about this, and so now I'm at the meeting that I'm running, and I'm making those sort of translations, I guess. The important part of obviously all of these leadership roles, but especially this one, is that you want to be consistent with the vision of the school. So whilst pedagogical leadership, you might be able to go relatively rogue and explore, these new and emerging and innovative ideas that sort of have caught your eye or your ear or your fancy. When it comes to team leader, you basically, you want to look at yourself as part of a totem pole and make sure that you're sort of, if everyone's rowing, that you're also rowing in the same direction rather than the opposite. And that, again, I'm probably not making this sound as tantalizing as it can be, but it's really important that this sort of work is done and done to a high level. So as a manager, as a team leader, you're essentially putting the structures in place and making sure the structures are working well. So you can lead a team of terrible teachers, but what you're expecting within your team is that they're contributing, they're sharing their work, and they're sort of doing the pro-social kind of teacher things that you want happening. So leading, collaboration, and those sort of things are really important. So six sort of core actual step-by-step things you might be doing in this role. Number one is team building. So, you might be putting in place norms. You might be, start every meeting with what was 3 good things that happened today. You might want to take more of a positive psychology approach to it. You might want to talk about 3 challenges. Basically, as a team leader, you're doing a lot of that kind of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You're probably giving your team a lot of kind of reflective activities. How's this going? And also just sort of the leadership work, I guess, is also making sure that your curriculum's documented, your timelines are up to date. Whether you want all your teachers to be teaching the exact same thing at the exact same time, or whether you want to give them more autonomy and freedom, of course that's what I would support. But you need to make sure that kind of your team is working as a team. Second thing is delegating. So you're the leader, but you also need to be sort of contingency planning. If you were to drop dead tomorrow, who's the next in line? And who's leading sort of the sub-teams within your team. And obviously this is some of the more transformational work, because you probably want to be thinking about, who's the next man, woman or person up, who's sort of got the ability to do the kind of things that you want to be doing. Or if you're not in that role yet, obviously you want to be putting yourself forward as that person, the next person up. All right, third thing is managing culture. So again, you probably don't want to be too sort of conspiratorial or sort of standoffish against your leadership team. You want to build a culture where there's obviously consultation and there's that sort of back and forth between different teams, including the one that you lead, but you also want to make sure that you're all heading in the same direction, as I said, sharing in a vision of what your school, what your setting, or what your teaching is. Number 4, running meetings. So you might think, how hard could it be to run a meeting? But I'm sure we've all sat through some terribly boring meetings, and so your job is to try and make it a good one. And so what does that look like for you? You probably want to make sure it's agendaed and minuted and that people are arriving on time, and then within that, what's most pressing, prioritising the things that need doing at what time. Obviously different times of year have different expectations and commitments, so keeping that in sort of in the front of your mind. And you know, maybe you want to bring in some readings, show some videos, you want to get your teachers engaged with the process of teaching, or maybe there's just work that needs doing. What that will look like at your school, of course, will be different, but you want to have a vision for what a good team looks like and what your subject area or whatever it is that you're leading sort of should look like in an ideal world. Number 5 is advocating for staff. So typically, keeping in mind the totem pole metaphor, you're sort of in the middle. So if leadership says, okay, all teachers need to have, you know, all of their lesson plans typed up and submitted by Tuesday, and you say, well, today's Monday, so that's probably, you know, maybe we need to extend the deadline, those kind of things, or it might go the other way. Staff might be saying, your teachers rather, might be saying, well, leadership is, needs to be doing X, Y, Z. So your job is somewhat in between there to be the conduit for respectful dialogue between those sort of layers of the group. So those are the 5 sort of core elements of this task, of this work. And of course, have a think about how these sort of suit your personality and your style.